0. Prologue. What a shame. A blonde-haired boy in an orange and black sweatshirt and orange pants stood in front of the Hokage Tower. He was waiting for his teammates because they had agreed to meet in Faith in the morning and undertake the next mission. So he waited and thought about a certain black-haired boy. Recently, rumors reached Konoha that Uchiha Itachi was killed by his younger brother, Uchiha Sasuke. I can't understand it. Sasuke, how could you have made such a mistake? The boy opened his eyes looking towards the sky, even though his blue eyes looked much more beautiful than that. Which one was it again? To think that I could have been dead by your hand, even though we are so similar to each other. The voice of his pink-haired friend broke him out of his thoughts. The boy immediately moved towards her with a smile. There was something good in this village, something that still kept him in there. The entire team left the Hokage's office in great disappointment. It turned out that the Hokage had no mission for them, and just wanted to let them know that, together with the other Kage, they had recognized Sasuke, their former friend, as a terrorist and awarded a reward for his capture or kill. This information upset the blonde to such an extent that he had to bite his tongue not to smoke something. So as soon as they left the Hokage's office, the blonde immediately headed home. I cannot believe it, he screamed, slamming the door. So I have wasted these years after all. And what for? That this imbecile would now be chased by all nations, because he had to kill his brother without knowing the truth about him first. The blonde threw helplessly on the bed. He didn't know what to do. He spent years training and searching, trying to convince the black-haired boy to come back to the village, to his home. And now such a thing. Huh? Does that really make no sense? Further pursuit. Suddenly he heard a knock on the window. It was strange after all his friends were always knocking on the door, unless his sensei forgot something again. The boy got up to sit down and turned towards the window. To his surprise, he didn't see any of his friends or his sensei, but the black-haired boy. The blonde immediately jumped up and opened the window, letting the boy inside. It was an even greater shock, because the raven-haired man immediately attacked him, but not to hurt him, but to hug him. Naruto looked uncertain at his ex-teammate, and he really couldn't believe what was happening. It wasn't just that the boy had come to him or that he was hugging him, but mostly that the boy was crying. So you found out the truth? He asked quietly, wrapping his hands around him. He didn't get an answer. He didn't have to get it. He knew it was about it. Naruto, the black-haired man said softly in a brittle voice. Could you help me forget, just for a moment? The consent expressed by the blonde was the biggest mistake of his life, a mistake for which he will pay with his own suffering in the next few years. The war is over. They have won. Sasuke put himself in the hands of the ANBU. The truth was, he regretted many things. You have a visitor. He heard the warden's harsh voice, followed by the sound of the bars being opened. You better behave, Uchiha, the guard said, leaving the cell. After removing the blindfold from his eyes, it took a moment to get used to the light. Imagine his surprise when he saw the silhouette of his blonde friend in his cell. But could he really call them that? Friends don't do the things they did. Although he was happy with the visit inside, he didn't show it. Something told him that it would not be a pleasant conversation. The boy's face indicated it. Naruto dash. What a shame, baby, he interrupted the black-haired boy. His face was mocking, and the black-haired himself blushed imperceptibly at the term the blonde used to describe him. Tell me, Sasuke, how does it feel? He asked with an ever-clearer mockery. You saved the world and let yourself be locked in a cell. Would you regret something? The boy didn't say a word, and he didn't have to. Never had to. The blonde always knew. He knew the answer without saying it. What a shame. You could have stayed with me, but you chose that fucking snake. The blonde's voice was saturated with venom. Sasuke had to admit, he didn't know this face of the blonde, and he was sincerely afraid of him. The boy standing in front of him wasn't the same blonde who was comforting him. The one that him wanted back in the village wasn't the one who loved him. Oh no, the boy was cool, his words cold and sharp as a blade ready to deliver the killing blow. He was hostile, and it terrified the black-haired boy. Just think, you had a victorious position, people who cared for and loved you, and you rejected it in the name of strength. For revenge, for sins that were not entirely your brother's fault. He continued inflicting more and more painful blows on the conscience. No, on the boy's heart. Naruto, you just still don't understand dash. No, Sasuke, you don't understand. You got millions of chances, you won't get more. Sasuke tried not to show his emotions, but his would-be lover really made it difficult for him. Was the person in front of him really the same man who loved him so much that he was ready to get down on his knees in front of the Kage and beg him not to kill him. Was it really the same person who had been steadfast in bringing him back to the village for years? Really, this face of the blonde terrified and upset him, yet he decided to provoke him a little. Can't wait forever? The blonde's reaction surprised the black-haired one again. The boy snorted with laughter. I'm getting bored. He turned to the exit, and, looking at the boy one last time, he tossed. It's really a shame, baby. Since Sasuke's wedding with Sakura, the blonde acted as if he didn't know the black-haired man, even if he helped him to relax. The blonde was paying the price for the mistake he had made. It was an unhappy love for a black-haired man, which over the years turned into envy and sincere hatred towards him. Although he was grateful to him for only 3 things that he kept like an eye in his head. 1. Chapter 1. You really don't know, Uchiha? It was a beautiful day, the sun was shining, and the present Hokage was on his way to his office. Together with their right hand and best friend Shikamaru, they agreed that they both could come a little later than usual to rest at home a little. On his way, he met a well-known black-haired man who rarely visited the village. The blonde's humor immediately broke. Without a word that he was not there at all, the blonde-haired man passed his friend, satisfied that he would avoid talking to him, and was stopped by the voice of the older one. Naruto, the blonde looked away, not smiling unnecessarily, turned to the man. Yes? Do you need anything? The black-haired man seemed confused, but it could only be imagination. Say, why are you so cold? He asked hesitantly. To tell the truth, he surprised him with this question. For a moment, the blonde thought that the man was really curious about his explanations. But why should he explain anything to him if he has not given him an explanation to this day? You really don't know Uchiha? He asked, shooting his interlocutor a cold look, surprising him. He never called me by name. This thought roared in the black-haired man's head, just as not one thought suggested by his conscience, and he had something to regret. Having received no answer from the black-eyed man, the blonde moved forward, pronouncing only one sentence. Such a shame. Sasuke decided to let it go in spite of his ears until someone's voice was calling his voice, and he forgot completely. The blonde stopped nearby and watched in silence. The Uchiha really irritated him. He knew that someday he would have to answer, say what the reason for his behavior was, explain a lot of things. But he really didn't have the strength to do it. He was tormented by this, his feelings, the feeling of guilt for what he had become, the feeling that he had failed those who placed their hopes on him on his deathbed. But he could not show it. He could not surrender to them. They would overwhelm him, and he could lose himself completely. So he stood in silence and watched the overcolored scene between his lover and his friend. In my mind, honestly answering the black-haired man's question. Because of one Uchiha, not so long ago, because only a dozen or so years ago, it seemed to him that he was the happiest man in the world. The war was over. The village accepted him, and finally he was respected. He was even nominated for the position of 7th Hokage. He also had his beloved with him, even though their relationship was a secret. The blonde waited for the right moment to tell him the secret that had been hidden for years and to propose. But his small hopes and dreams quickly shattered. He grew unique roses for his lover. They were of a beautiful indigo color, bred with the help of chakra, so that they could live forever and at the same time could serve as its source. However, his happy life didn't last long. One beautiful day, Naruto was going to the appointed place. For a change, it was Sasuke who suggested that they meet. He decided to leave early and arrange a few more things. With a smile on his face, he headed to the meeting place. He couldn't wait. Today was the day when he was going to finally reveal Sasuke's secret, maybe even propose. However, one thing stopped. He decided to take a shortcut, and he saw something he shouldn't have. This image was engraved in his memory, and he knew then that he would never get rid of it. Sasuke Uchiha, his lover, the person for whom he was to lay down his life at one point in his life, and at the same time his greatest enemy, had just proposed to Sakura, his best friend, his sister. It hurt more when he noticed a characteristically unique rose in the pink-haired woman's hair, which he had grown over the years to give to the black-haired man. The bouquet in his hand fell to the ground, crumpled, and destroyed the whole bouquet. Salty liquid started to run down the blonde's cheeks. He cried. All he could do was cry. His hopes had just been shattered into millions of pieces along with his heart. It hurt very much, but he couldn't let it show. Sakura didn't know. Nobody knew. He should be happy that his friend was happy that her dreams had finally come true, even if his whole life had just collapsed. 2. Chapter 2. Oka-san. Naruto looked at his friend and her husband. He didn't blame her. He couldn't bring himself to blame her. They look happy. he thought one last time, glancing at a pair of lovers. Unable to look at them any longer, he continued his way to the Hokage Tower. Despite many years, it still fucking hurts. Meanwhile, in the Hokage's belief, stood Shikamaru, the right hand of the 7th Hokage. Against him were Boruto and Sarada, children of the two most important people in the village. A few minutes earlier, they and one of the ANBU had come to fetch some suspicious boy who was hanging around at the entrance to the village. The three of them stood in silence and waited for the blonde-haired Hokage to finally show up. "Where are you, Naruto?" "We slipped it a bit," the black-haired man thought. Looking up at the ceiling, he couldn't hold back the two in front of him. They looked too much like their parents. The sounds of footsteps spread across the corridor, and after a while the long-awaited blonde appeared in the room. The situation surprised him, because his son would rather not come to him. If he didn't have something to pass on from his mother, or if his team was to get a mission, the blonde was already used to it. "Shikamaru," he said, finally getting the attention of the other three. "Boruto, Sarada? What are you guys doing here? Has something happened?" he asked, looking directly at the children. The black-haired girl turned towards him and with a smile replied, "Oh heyo Hokage-sama. We wanted to make sure she was not given to finish, because the older black hair cut her off. They found some weird jet black boy hanging around at the entrance to the village," explained for the girl. "I don't know what was so strange about him, because from what they said he was just walking in the surrounding forest." The ANBU also confirmed it. "Yes, you are not allowed to catch or lock anyone for walking in the woods yet." "That's not the point," the younger blonde said. "The boy looks suspiciously similar to Sasuke-san. Only the eye color doesn't match," he explained, turning to his father. Naruto stiffened at the news. It could have been a coincidence, right? It did not have to be after all. He looked at his friend. The expression on his face didn't like the man. It was not a coincidence. "Boruto is right. This boy looks similar to my father, but they are a bit different." Boruto was watching his father closely. Something did not suit him in his behavior. "Calm down. Over the years you've done it, and now you will. At worst I'll have to tell them, right?" He was wrong. It was beyond him. A secret hidden for 16 years. He hoped that, at least, the cause of the confusion was important. Otherwise, he would not be able to vouch for himself. "Where is he now?" he asked with mock composure. He couldn't help but pretend. He was always good. "Together with one of the ANBU. He is waiting for you in the next room," the black-haired man explained, then let the woman know that they could go out to them. A short boy with jet black, wildly disheveled hair and red wisps in a tangle entered the room. He had a pale complexion, which made his scar-like markings on his cheeks hardly visible. He was dressed in orange pants tucked under the knees and a short indigo kimono, with black fingerless gloves on his hands and black sandals on his feet. "Saruto," the Hokage said. The boy opened his eyes at the sound of a familiar voice saying his name and raised his head, revealing beautiful blue eyes. Something began to reach the younger of the blonde. The boy was not only similar to his teacher, but also to his father. However, it seemed that his black-haired friend didn't notice it, or she was surprised by the fact that the boy reacted to the name spoken by the blonde. The black-haired boy was surprised at first, but after a while the surprise passed, and in his place was happiness, shame, and guilt. Tears sprang to his eyes, and he flew towards the older blonde, not caring about anyone. Nobody had time to react to such a sudden behavior of the boy. The boy ran up to the blonde and hugged him tightly, almost knocking them both over. "Oka-san." Chapter 3. I'm going to tell you an SS rank secret. Everyone, especially the two young shinobi, stood surprised, all except the Hokage and his right hand. The black-haired boy held tight and did not want to let go of the blonde, which he understood that his child was afraid, despite his age. They stood in silence until the younger blonde finally spoke up. "Oka-san, what is this sick joke?" he shouted indignantly at his father. "By what right does this brat refer to him like that?" The eyes fell on the older blonde. Despite the situation, he was calm. He was not angry or embarrassed. He just stood still and held the black-haired man. "Go away." Turned to the ANBU, which immediately disappeared after hearing the order, and the blonde changed his position to where the woman in the mask was standing a moment ago. "This is not a joke, Boruto," he began calmly, upsetting his son even more. "He is my son," he said, looking at the black-haired boy who fell asleep. "Too many emotions," he thought, smiling gently. The younger Uzumaki together with the young Uchiha stood motionless. It shocked them. After all, the blonde had a wife and 3 children. How could he cheat on his own family? What? What his father said quickly hit Boruto, and shock was replaced by rage and disbelief. So the fact that he's working all the time is just an excuse? Ran through the mind of the younger one. This is the only possible version of events that he could have come up with. How erroneous thinking. How could you do this to Mom? He shouted. He was fed up with his behavior. Always at work. There is no time for his own family, and it turns out that he has a child with another. All this talk about your job, and how much and how hard you gotta do it, your eternal lack of time was just an excuse, wasn't it? He had to relieve his emotions. He really had had enough. Boruto. At last the black-haired man spoke up. He understood, because he reacted that way himself. But nevertheless the younger man's behavior irritated him. Naruto gave birth to Naruto when he was 16 years old. In those years, your mother couldn't even tell him her feelings. It was cold and out of place, but he was irritated. What? The Hokage-sama is the one who gave birth? Asked the girl that Boruto had completely forgotten was standing next to him. It is impossible. A man cannot be pregnant. It is genetically impossible. The younger blonde was perhaps even more shocked than his friend, but they were both sure that something like this was impossible and physically impossible. There are exceptions. Men are sometimes born with both female and male organs, but that doesn't apply to Naruto. Nara explained it was not a pleasant conversation and he certainly shouldn't explain it. Even Naruto didn't quite understand it. We really need Karen now, he thought, looking at the blonde still hugging his son. You're right, Boruto, and you, Sarada, too, because I know what you are thinking. The Hokage spoke. It is not possible. Even as Shikamaru said, it is quite specific, but just as many things are completely different if you are a Jinchuriki. He spoke slowly, calmly, so that the younger ones would not have a problem with keeping up. But that doesn't change the fact that he's our age, he said accusingly, pointing his finger at the sleeping boy. The older one laughed under his breath. Kai said, and the boy's appearance changed completely, maybe not entirely. Now he was taller, about the same height as the Hokage. His features were more mature. Shika, can you? He turned to his friend, and he understood immediately. He took from the blonde, sleeping black-haired man and left all three of them alone. Now, Boruto and Sarada, I will reveal to you the secret of the rank SS. Surprise them. Why would he reveal such an important secret to two kids? They exchanged glances, and then they looked at the blonde in unison. What is that? The girl asked. The man took a deep breath and looked up. You have two older brothers and one younger, he said, opening his eyes and watching the children's reaction. They were confused. Maybe I shouldn't. No, it's about time they found out the truth, he thought, not sure what their reaction meant. Wait, do we? Both? The younger one almost screamed as his father's words reached him. Yes, both of you. So it means that my father. The girl began, looking and waiting for a reaction. She hoped she was mistakenly thinking that it was impossible. That's right. He didn't need to say anything else. For so many years, we only really cheated on Hinata and Sakura once, 9 years ago to be exact. There was quite an awkward silence. This is supposed to be consolation? Boruto asked, slightly irritated. No, replied the elder. I just think you should know the truth. They didn't know what to say, how to react. It was too much. However, one thought troubled the young Uchiha. It would even make sense. Does my father know? She asked, looking directly into the eyes of the older blonde, as if she was looking for the slightest lie. No, nobody but Karen, Shikamaru, Itachi, and Gaara. Your mother knows too, Boruto. He replied, shocking his son. Mom knows. So, you raised them yourself? He asked, lowering his head. It was a tough conversation. When I have a moment, I'm there. But I mostly take care of them. He didn't finish. The two teenagers hugged him tightly. It surprised him. He was sure their reaction would be completely different. He was even prepared for his son to hate him completely. But he did not expect such a reaction. But he returned the hug. Maybe it will be better? I hope she didn't confuse them too much. Maybe you want to meet them? He asked, not sure if he was doing the right thing. The kids looked up at the man in surprise. Too fast. Maybe I should have waited, he thought as he waited for the reply. Really? They asked in surprise. If you only want. 4. Chapter 4. Did you have fun today? The blonde-haired Hokage was just waiting for two children. He did not expect that they would agree to his proposal. I sent Naruto home 2 days ago. I hope they prepared. It was strange for him. Usually on days like this, he would be home already. waiting for his sons to get up. Today he was waiting for his son and his friend's daughter. He never thought that the day would come when he would lead them there. Most of the time he thought that he would take this secret to the grave so that his wife and children would not know it. And above all, the father of the three. Wandering in his mind, the man did not hear the two he was waiting for come up to him. They were both surprised by the appearance of the blonde, used to his normal appearance. "Who are you and what have you done to the old man?" Caught his father's attention, Naruto turned to the children. "Do I really look so bad?" he thought at first, but looking at the children's expressions, he wasn't sure. "It's still me, Boruto. I've never seen him in such an outfit." The blonde had his hair tied in a little ponytail at the bottom, and his bangs were combed to the left. The loose pants were a light shade of orange with bandages wrapped at the ends of the legs, all held by a black belt. He wore a black mesh t-shirt and a white t-shirt that was belly-length with long green sleeves. The outfit definitely differed from the one they saw him in every day. "He looks better with his hair up," the two thought, looking at the blonde. The young Uchiha was also not dressed as usual. She was wearing a dark pink dress and dark gray knee socks. However, what caught the attention of the elder of the blondes was the ornament in the girl's hair. It was a beautiful pink flower, a dark pink one tied with 2 rose petals, but not just any one. Oh no, this color, this scent and shape the blonde knew perfectly well. "No, Sarada, where did you get this flower from?" The younger of the blonde only now noticed that his friend had something in her hair. "I got this pink one from Ino-san, and my mother wove these blue petals." The blonde was sure. He didn't even have to ask. After a while, the girl herself confirmed his guesses. "Mum said there was a chakra in that rose so she would never die. My father gave it to her," she said enthusiastically. After a short while, she realized what she said. "I'm sorry, I dash." "Don't be. It's okay. In the end, your father loves your mother. It's natural to give her flowers," he said, concealing his annoyance. Didn't want to spoil the mood and wanted to leave this hideous village as soon as possible. If he really loves her, why has he betrayed her? The younger blonde thought. Only 2 days ago he found out that his father was his teacher's lover. But for some reason the feeling of rage with his father did not last long. He could not explain it, but he had the impression that his parents' love was never quite so true. He reconciled with that some time ago. Even from his mother he saw that something was not quite what they said, but he hadn't delved until now. "I think it's time for us," the man said enthusiastically and changed into a younger version of himself so as not to have much trouble leaving the village. The journey was not as long as they expected. A bit of the road from the village, the blonde stopped and put a few seals. Then they were in a completely different place. Currently, they were trying to control themselves after this quite unusual journey. "I must have exaggerated a bit with the distance," thought the older one, looking at the 2 kids in front of him. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do about it. He was both stressed out and excited. "Come on, it's not far away anymore," he said, smiling at the other 2 who had already tidied up. However, the man's smile surprised them a bit. It was not the same smile they always saw. No, this one was full of joy and enthusiasm. It was different, one thought. The same thought flashed through the kids' heads when they looked at this smile, not only the smile, but at the blonde himself. He's like a completely different person. A few minutes later, after a decent walk in the woods, they reached a small house. It was not big, but definitely bigger than the house of Boruto or Sarada. He looked majestic considering that they both thought that there must be a beautiful view from the windows of the ruins of the village they had spotted on the way. They went inside to see a traditional living room, full of photos and flowers and other decorations. The interior was warm and friendly, as if inviting even when there was silence, as if it reflected the owners. The blonde-haired man changed his appearance back. "I'm at home," he exclaimed, raising his hands high up. The sudden raising of his voices scared the 2 children, but the tone the blonde used calmed them down quite quickly. They stood a while until they heard footsteps approaching quickly. After a few seconds, they saw a tall, but shorter than recently, black-haired boy dressed in maroon trousers shinobi, a black t-shirt with a gray check and a blood-red jacket and a stripe in exactly the same colors. Ka-san ran up and immediately threw himself at the older blonde, hugging him tightly. After a while, Saruto came with another boy, much younger. "Looks like Himawari age," he thought, looking at the tiny, black-haired boy hiding behind his brother. Suddenly, they both felt a prick in the cage, something like that. This scene never happened at their house. A warm welcome at the door, smiles and hugs. And that is the warmth that reigns in the house. They were jealous. Yes, they missed it, and they felt as if they didn't belong to this house, to this scene. "Boys, I want you to meet your siblings. Well, two of them," he said, releasing the boy from his grip and pointing to the other two who stood by his side. The black-haired man took a seat next to his brother and, similarly to the younger one, was watching the two young teenagers. "The ones you were talking about, Oka-san?" The youngest voice was kind and warm, and the question surprised the other two. "He told them about us?" "Yes, Minato, exactly these. Get to know each other, and I'll go make dinner, okay?" he said, addressing all five. So without complaining, the two eldest took the still surprised siblings, and the youngest followed mother into the kitchen. The four of them were sitting in the living room looking at each other just now, but they both noticed that both Naruto and the younger boy, whose name they hadn't known yet, had two mustaches just like Naruto, and both had blue eyes that they inherited from the blonde. What caught the attention of the blonde was red strands of hair in the fringe. They also inherited them, huh? He thought. The longer they looked at, the more common features they saw, and noticed quite a specific thing. Both of them were more similar to Naruto than to Sasuke. "This is awkward," the blonde finally said, breaking the silence. "This is," confirmed the older of the black-haired boys. "Anyway, as you know, my name is Naruto. I'm 16 years old." The older black-haired man began introducing himself as he should, in his opinion, and what his aunt and mother said. "Oh, I'm sorry." She laughed awkwardly as they met the gaze. "I am Sarada. I'm 12 years old." "Minma, 14, he said, smiling from ear to ear. "Naruto, 12. For some reason, a strange thought ran through the head of the black-haired girl. They really are alike, even if it's only half-blood. For a brief moment, they sat in relative silence, hearing only the sounds from the kitchen. "Right, the little one you saw is Minato. He's 8 years old." At the sound of these words, they slightly clouded over this incident, which Blue-Eyed had previously mentioned. Something happened? The first one to notice and ask was Minma. He didn't like their reaction. "Minato, you mean like the four Hokage?" Not wanting to start any quarrels on such an important day, she decided to wade in on the subject, although the younger of the black-haired boys wanted to have a little fun. "That's right. Ka-san said he wanted to name his son after his father," he said, looking into the eyes of the blonde, which caused his blood pressure to rise. "I'm sure he wanted to call you that, Naruto." Unfortunately for Minma, his older brother decided to spoil his fun and cut in before anything could happen. The boy was surprised by this statement. "Oka-san said dinner is ready." The silence was broken by Minato, whom, to tell the truth, she hadn't heard him approaching. Without noticing it beforehand, the two of Konoha noticed that Naruto and Minato differed from Minma in complexion. They were paler. Of course, they also pointed out that the youngest of them all looked like a small copy of Sasuke, unlike their brothers who had more traits after the 7th Hokage. The rest of the day went smoothly. They ate their lunch, which was a surprise to both young teenagers that the Hokage could cook so well. It was a surprise to Naruto that he could even do it at all. Contrary to appearances and earlier dislikes, Minma and Naruto decided to make a joke with the older blonde, which ended up running around the house with a win for Naruto. Thus, the three remained, but only watched as their brothers ran away. At the end, they showed them the gardens where they spent the rest of the day. It's a really nice feeling. The girls sat among the bushes while Minato played with her hair, combing and arranging it in various ways until he found the perfect one. The ornament caught his eye. This ornament. The girl looked at the thoughtful face of the younger boy. "Those blue. No, those indigo petals look like the roses that Oka-san was growing," he said, looking closely. It surprised Sarada, because if the Hokage bred them, how could her mother have had them? Aunt Karen said he once bred them for someone special. Naruto and Minma said that after I was born, he stopped breeding them completely, but he never actually said for whom. One thought flashed in Sarada's head, crazy but possible. Whether were they bred for my father? She didn't get the answer because she didn't ask, and literally a moment later she heard the voice of the older blonde. "You better behave." They were standing in the living room and saying goodbye to the other three. "Especially you, Minma," he said, looking at the boy sternly and receiving indulgent glances from the rest except Minato, who cuddled up to the blonde. "Of course, Oka-san." Naruto looked at his father. He kissed the youngest on the forehead and smiled. Again, it was a smile unknown to the younger one. A smile full of tenderness, warmth, understanding, joy, and indulgence. He liked this smile. It was relaxing and natural. When he is in Konoha, he rarely, no, never smiles like that. if he knew that this thought would occupy his mind for a long time. We'll stay longer next time. Literally a moment later, they were back in the village. The smile had not left the Hokage's lips since they left. He listened with great joy as the two teenagers described and shared with him their impressions of the day. It did not escape his son's attention. They went back to the starting point. The blonde faced them and smiled broadly. "Did you have fun today?" he asked, waiting for an answer, which he did not have to wait for long. Broad smiles appeared on the faces of both children, and they both agreed that they had a great time. "That's good dash." His statement was interrupted by a sudden pain in the back of his head. Chapter 5. You're still a traitor. The cause of the sudden pain was none other than Sasuke Uchiha. The man, as soon as he saw the blonde and the children, ran up to them and hit him on the back of the head, making the blonde stagger and fall to his knees. "Sasuke." From a distance they heard the voice of a pink-haired woman who, along with purple-haired woman, reached their husbands. "Do you have any idea how much we were worried? You haven't told anyone that you are going to leave the village, especially since you are taking Sarada with you." The blonde didn't get up. He was kneeling quietly listening to the snippets of his friend. "You're the Hokage, goddammit. Grow up finally, you dash." The salvo of more screams was interrupted by a worried, violet-eyed woman's voice. "I think you should calm down a little." Sakura, seeing a good opportunity, immediately approached the black-haired man and hugged him from behind, mainly to prevent further blows towards the blonde. "Hinata is right. You need to calm down." Naruto looked away, looking at a pair of his friends, a successful, loving marriage. He looked at them with reproach and contempt. "Isn't that funny? It's like I saw you reassuring Sasuke during our Chunin exam." Looking at them, he remembered the second stage of their Chunin exam. The first time Sasuke had used that hideous power he had gotten from Orochimaru. The first time he lost control of her. He couldn't look at a couple who denied the words happy marriage, even though he himself was in the opinion of others. "Isn't that funny?" he said, raising his head, still not even glancing for a moment in the direction of the other three adults. He was looking away, further than the children stood in front of him, further than the Konoha gate. "You said you were friends." The image of black-haired men appeared in the head of the blonde, when they were still teenagers, when he tried to kill his current wife. Uchiha betrayed him. He proposed to another, even though they were together. He knew about it. He saw it. It hurt. But he knew that the Uchiha didn't regret it. He never regretted it. Despite the pain, he tried to forget his old feelings. He tried to forget that he loved him, but it hurt. He acted as if nothing had ever happened, as if he had never had love for the black-haired boy, any feelings that would exceed the limits of their brotherly bond. He behaved normally, talked to them normally, even congratulated them, and was the black-haired man's best man on their wedding. He loved him, showed him affection, gave him support in his darkest moments when he needed it most. But it never mattered to him, so he forgot. He hid it deeply and forgot about the feelings. He was slowly getting melted and cold. He was like that. He started to hate his old lover. He hated him with all his heart. For all these years of suffering, he was so sick of pretending. "You didn't cheat on me," he said mockingly, getting up from his knees. He really enjoyed this. They thought he was irresponsible, and they didn't know the whole truth. He turned his head slightly towards a pair of his former friends, looked at the black-haired man, implying that it was for him. He didn't understand. "You are still a traitor." There was a deafening silence, and no one spoke. Sasuke looked at his former lover in disbelief. He expected everyone, but not him. Despite the past years, some still called him a traitor. He never paid attention to it, even though his wife was with Naruto more than once. She asked, making fights. "How can you allow someone to call Sasuke a traitor?" she screamed, furious. "He's a hero just like us, and you know it best." Her words always echoed through the village. Sasuke had his suspicions, but they were wrong. They never got an answer from the blonde. Once he didn't reprimand anything, didn't answer, didn't direct them. Everybody in the village knew when the blonde became Hokage, he was going to make sure that he would forbid saying any bad things about the last Uchiha. But he forbade to speak badly about the clan itself. He never mentioned anything about the black-haired man. They could offend him, talk badly about him, as long as it didn't come down to the subject of the clan itself. Ironic, wasn't it? Today, however, Sasuke finally got an answer for which he had been waiting so long, and yet he was not ready for it. He preferred to hear it from anyone, except the blonde, whose mouth had spilled that hideous word, making him sick. Naruto considered him a traitor, yet he seemed to understand and not understand at the same time. Was the reason the blonde thought so because he broke his heart? Did he think they would be together after he got back? He never said he loved him. At least he didn't remember him saying that. Was his brother suffering because of him, and that was the reason? He had been struggling with it for years. He couldn't stop thinking about it. How much pain it caused them, how much they suffered because of it. But he never thought it was that serious. It was cruel of him. How much he was unaware of his feelings. He was cruel, cruelly blind. His behavior was selfish, cruel. He contradicted himself. And for so many years, nothing has changed. He was a hypocrite and never realized it. And the blonde man standing in front of him decided to show it to him after many years. He had stopped pretending and was not going to put his mask back on. Chapter 6. For reasons that are relatively different and at the same time identical, the black-haired man stood staring in disbelief at the man standing in front of him. He saw less and less because of the tears flowing to his eyes. He didn't control them. He didn't expect that his words could lead him to cry. And yet the blonde was not touched with disgust looking at the Uchiha. Oh, he really said it, she thought, looking in disbelief, more than the black-haired one. Hinata never thought that she would hear these words. It was unnatural. However, any shock that appeared on the faces of the others was not visible on the face of the green-eyed woman. There was fury on her face. "How dare you?" she said softly, letting go of her husband. "Wasn't you the one who always stood by his side?" She came out from behind the man, stood in front of the blonde. Well, almost. The blonde still didn't turn towards them. Only his face was turned towards them. He didn't answer her. It made her even more furious. The children were still standing in front of the blonde, seeing his expression. Pure annoyance with contempt. Something like this Naruto had not seen all his life, despite the fact that he was the main cause of his father's bad mood. He had seen him angry and irritated more than once, but he had never seen him show so much contempt and anger combined with disgust when looking at someone. Sarada, on the other hand, didn't know what to think. Her father was crying. It was the first time she had seen such a thing. Yes, her parents quarreled. More than once they were serious quarrels which her mother left crying, but never her father. Did Hokage-sama's words hurt him so much? She didn't know. It was strange, and her mother had never been so angry either. Was the blonde really able to evoke such feelings in her parents? And the blonde finally spoke up. He didn't turn around. He just looked into her eyes. She fell silent, as if she was afraid of something. His beautiful blue eyes darkened, darker, cooler, as cold as sharp as a newly sharpened sword. "Do I have any good with it?" He turned slowly. The children still stared in shock. Hinata lowered her head. Didn't want to see this side of her husband. She never had contact with it, and didn't want to have. "Sure, he's the Shadow Kage, but is there anything else?" She didn't answer. Sakura wasn't able to answer. The fact that her best friend was acting this way completely scared her. She didn't know him from this point of view. At that moment, she felt as if she had lived her whole life with a stranger, having no idea about it, or about who she was spending her youth with. "I thought so too." His tone was dry, lacking the hint of what was well known to them. "Let's go home." Dropped and headed for his home, on the way to his office to announce that he was back alive and well. His son ran after him right after the blonde disappeared in the building, just like the mother of the younger blonde. They stood for a moment in front of the Hokage's office. The blonde was leaning against the wall, trying to understand what had happened. He just found out that he has siblings and that his father could get pregnant. Worse, his sibling's father was his friend's father. His master, a person he admired more than his father. However, with the knowledge that has so far earned this respect, it began to evaporate like gas. Naruto thought that the black-haired man was way better than his father. How wrong he was. He was worse than him, and he didn't think anyone could be like that. "Mom." He spoke softly, as if afraid someone would hear them, even though they were the only ones in the corridor. "Yes, darling," she said, smiling as she turned to her son. She was worried that what he had just seen might have a bad influence on him. "Have you ever seen it? This face of father?" The question surprised the woman. She didn't think she would ask about it, even though she had such a feeling. "No, it was the first time." Answered truthfully. Yes, she saw the blonde furious, even during the war, but she was never so close. She did not see it, his terribly cold, sharp gaze. Even though it was not directed at her, she had the impression that he could kill her with it. "I see." They stood in the corridor for a while longer in silence, and finally the blonde man left the office with a briefcase. They didn't ask. They didn't know if the man was still angry, and they didn't want to risk it. What happened? Scared the violet eye? and she began to worry about what will happen when the blonde discovers her little secret. It was the middle of the night, and the blonde couldn't sleep. He went for a short walk to the kitchen for a glass of water, only to see something unusual. Yes, he had seen my father work, but he had never seen him working at home in the dining room. The blonde man raised his head slowly, putting the papers on the table with an exhalation. His attention was caught by the figure of his son standing by the stairs. "Did something happen to Naruto?" he asked, scaring his son lightly. "No, I can't sleep," he replied quietly, looking away. "What's with the papers?" he asked, interested in the number of documents lying on the table and next to him. The blonde older man looked at his son and then at the papers, then sighed. "You could say it's my punishment. Shikamaru gave me the most urgent documents to look at. I was supposed to do it today in the office, but—" He laughed while talking about it. Naruto raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Father put his work aside because we wanted to meet with—" He didn't finish his thoughts. It was a rare feat his father spends most of his time at work, but after today's trip, he realized that, unlike him and Himawari, their brothers are much worse off. They don't live together, they don't even live in the same village. Where he and Himawari can at least visit him at work or sometimes find him at home, Saruto, Minma, and Minota are not so well off. He felt bad about it. And just at the thought of how happy they were when Naruto visited them, they didn't seem to blame him for not spending a lot of time with him, practically not at all. "Dad, maybe you thought that Himawari and Kawaki would meet someday." He didn't know whether to finish. The mere fact that he and Sarada found out about it was by chance. By chance they discovered the blonde's most hidden secret. "More than once, I thought about what it would be like to have all my children together. It would be really nice if you could have good contact with each other and be able to live like a normal family." The blonde looked at the lamp with a dreamy look with a gentle smile, the same that Naruto saw when they were at the other three. "So why not dash? I talked to Hinata." The blonde interrupted his son. "She agreed," he said, smiling at his son. In a way, Naruto was really happy. He had a chance to live with all his siblings. He wanted to see Sarada's face. The girl was jealous that she had no siblings unlike the blonde. "Now take what you came for and go to sleep, or I will think you have some nightly plans like your mother." The blonde laughed under his breath, but the second part of the sentence caught the attention of the younger man as he headed for the kitchen. "Mom left?" he asked, reaching into the cupboard for a glass. "Yes. She said she had a date with Ino and Sakura. I don't see why I should forbid her or anything." Naruto went back to looking at the papers. He had to take them all checked and signed in the morning. She was wearing that violet dress with an orange bow at the waist and an orange collar, remember? Of course, the younger one remembered. It was the dress they had chosen for their birthday as a gift for the violet eye. "Although as I said that I would also be working from home tomorrow, I thought she was like she felt guilty," said the older one. He spoke more to himself than to his son, but the younger did not like it. He knew that there was something wrong for a long time. His mother often went out, dressed differently, combed differently, sometimes painted. Not wanting to do so, now thinking about it, he wished his father good night and returned to his room, leaving the elder with his work alone. Both of them were awake that night, for reasons that are relatively different and at the same time identical. Chapter 7. It will be a Baiji surprise. As he said, he did so. The next day, Naruto was sitting in the dining room with his two children, Himawari, who in her yellow nightgown, fierce, enthusiastic, told her father about her dream, and Kawaki, who was sitting on the other side of the blonde, silently eating breakfast prepared by their father, listening to his sister's story. Their quiet morning was not interrupted by Naruto, who entered the dining room sleepily. Because of the night conversation with his father, he couldn't fall asleep, all the time thinking about his mother's strange behavior, which also made him forget that his father was supposed to work at home today. "Dad!" he screamed in surprise when he saw the blonde man dressed in a timely manner, sitting at the table with his siblings in the peace of mind eating breakfast. The blonde raised his head and only smiled, guessing that his son could have forgotten. "Good morning, Naruto." After a while, Naruto was sitting next to his sister, eating sandwiches and sipping tea, similar to the others. "Dad," he said suddenly, remembering something. He had this unbearable feeling since yesterday, and he felt he needed to talk to someone about it, preferably his father. "Can we talk?" He didn't look up from the table, so he didn't see a gentle smile on the face of the older blonde. "Why don't we go to the kitchen?" Naruto stood in front of his father staring at the floor. He didn't know where to start. He rarely spoke to his father. "Something happened?" asked the elder. Seeing his son's embarrassment, he didn't quite know how to conduct such a conversation himself. He grew up without a father, but he remembered the moments when Irika shouted at him, scolded him for his pranks, and talked to him, treated him like a son. So the blonde treated him like a father. So he decided to take him as an example when Saruto was born. Then Minma, Boruto, Minato, Himawari, and Kawaki. He wanted, although he did not have much time or a greater chance for it, he wanted to be a good father. So he thought that Irika would be the best example. It's just that. He couldn't choose the words. He felt that if he said something wrong, the blonde would misunderstand him, and maybe he would get angry. The vision of his father from yesterday terrified him, but he had to share it because he felt it would eat him up. So he took a deep breath and looked up to meet his father's eyes. I have the feeling that yesterday's situation is my and Sarada's fault, he said, finally seeing his father's blue eyes widen slowly in surprise. He didn't speak, stood for a long moment, which seemed to be an hour, and stood staring at his son in surprise. What are you talking about? It was not, is not, and never will be your fault, he finally said, calming down. It's just something I should have told him years ago, but I couldn't do it then. The blonde walked up to his son and hugged him tightly, making sure that the younger one understood what he meant. Is that because of the feelings you had for him? Asked, not surely a younger blonde. His father's past intrigued him, now more than before. He wanted to find out what his father was going through to be able to understand him. Perhaps I once thought he was someone important to me, he said, chuckling to himself. I even made a promise to his brother that I would take care of him. It was one of the most precious memories. He had good memories of black-haired man. Itachi was definitely better than his younger brother. It turned out to be worthless, so I stopped caring about him or his feelings. His tone was cooler. Boruto noticed it. It's not the first time. They both stood in silence, hugged, and said nothing. Boruto had to think it over, and he didn't want to ask too much because he was afraid that his father might stop answering and even get irritated for every question asked, even though Naruto is not like that. Naruto, in turn, had an internal conversation with himself. After all these years, forgive me, Itachi, but I'm already sick of all this shit. Was he fed up? Yes, but he wasn't going to admit it. He didn't want to worry others about his problems. He never did. So he wasn't going to start now. Maybe Ino and Kakashi are right, but what about Shikamaru? After the debate, he stuttered in his mind. He concluded that if he wanted to accept Kakashi's proposal, he must first prepare for it, even if it would spoil his and Hinata's plans. Boruto, tell Himawari and Kawaki to clean up. I have to go somewhere for a while. The younger one did not like it, but he did not want to ask. Don't worry, I just need to prepare a little surprise, he said with a smile, patting his son on the head as he saw his expression. He was browsing the contact list while the children were cleaning up after breakfast. He looked for a moment at the bed behind him and his wife with a hangover, who was just sleeping off going out with her friends. He frowned. He knew that he was about to spoil everything. His and Hinata's plans, his marriage, maybe even his reputation, but he was ready to do it all. He devoted himself all his life to others. He was ready to sacrifice others for his own happiness. He was going to be selfish. Sorry, Hinata, but we both know it won't work that way. He dialed a number and left the bedroom to let his wife sleep. Standing in the corridor, he made sure that no one was around. It's not that he doesn't trust his kids, it's just a habit. He waited a moment before someone finally answered. Still early in the morning after all. Good morning, Kakashi, he said as happily as he could, receiving a yawn and a sleepy voice on the other side in return. Good morning, what you need? At the sound of this long-awaited question, the blonde only smiled. Not that silver-haired man was able to see it, but that was the impression he had. He knew the blonde too well. I need your knowledge and a little help, he said, keeping a smile, sounding as polite as he could for the moment. He had to wait a while for the answer. The man definitely thought about the pros and cons, but finally agreed. Great. We'll meet at the gate in 15 minutes. Without waiting for an answer, he hung up and lowered his hand, stared at the display for a moment, then turned the device off and put it in his pocket. He chuckled under his breath and looked up. This will be a by G surprise, he thought with a big mocking sadistic smile. From his eyes you could easily deduce how excited he was with the idea, and it didn't bode well. He was considered a hero all over the world. He was their hero, but no one knew how affectionate, cold, and sadistic this hero had become over the years. 8. Chapter 8. You're their uncle. In the woods far away from Konoha stood an annoyed blonde hokage who waited for his sensei to finally pull himself together. A few minutes ago, they stood at the Konoha gate after the blonde called the silver-haired man. The older man didn't really know what to expect, but the fact that his apprentice transported them such a long way so quickly surprised and scared him. "Are we there yet?" asked the slightly out-of-breath, silver-haired man. He transported them far away, but they had to walk the rest of the way because, as the blonde said, "A little walk in nature will do us both good." And so now Kakashi stood slightly out of breath and tired from all the walking. The blonde did not even give him a moment to rest, except for this one now. Tired of waiting, Naruto walked over to his predecessor, grabbed his ear, and dragged him in a well-known direction. They were waiting for them. Besides, he wanted to get back to Konoha as soon as possible, as he had promised he would be back at lunchtime. "Come on, old man." Literally minutes later, Kakashi was standing in the living room, in a house that was in the middle of the woods without any explanation from his blonde-haired student. As if that weren't weird enough, 3 children were standing in front of him, looking like a mixture of Naruto standing on his right and his other apprentice, Sasuke. The youngest of the 3, as soon as he saw them, he immediately ran to hug the blonde. He most resembled his raven-haired student, especially when he was a child, before his parents died. "So you want to tell me?" He began as calmly as he could, but the emotions took over and he couldn't stand it. "That you have 3 kids with emo duckus bitch?" he screamed, scaring Minato, who only hugged the blonde tighter. He in turn did not react to the man's screams. Basically, it even made him laugh with the way his sensei called the raven-haired man. He took a breath. "Yes," he said calmly, not looking at the expression of the man standing next to him. "And Gaara knows? He is my brother, that goes without saying." The blonde smile did not disappear from his face, and at the thought of the red-haired Kazekage, even slightly enlarged. "And Shikamaru," which is basically pretty obvious. The blonde didn't even have to answer or straighten. The silver-haired man answered himself. "And Karen and Hinata." The older man continued. Normally the blonde would start to get irritated, but surprisingly, such discoveries are not made every day. "Kakashi, Karen is my family, my cousin. And Hinata, as you know, is my wife. Unless you have already forgotten because of your dementia, it is understandable at your age." Naruto laughed under his breath as Kakashi looked at him with hurt in his eyes. He felt offended. He wasn't that old at all. "Maybe she is, but I can clearly see that you are not one of the most faithful. You have 3 sons with Sasuke." He raised his voice, pointing at the children in turn. "And no, I don't have dementia. I'm not that old. But you apparently have, since everyone knows, even Itachi, who is dead." He was indignant at how he could have forgotten him. He understood the seriousness, but it still hurt him to some extent that his student, the person he considered to be his family, didn't trust him enough to entrust the secret. "You said to everyone, but not to your dear sensei." "Oh, stop dramatizing." He finally turned to the silver-haired man. Meanwhile, the whole show was watched by Saruto and Minma. Basically just Saruto, because Minma fell asleep standing. "What's going on here?" Through the boy, suddenly he heard a bang and saw that it was just his younger brother, who finally lost his balance and fell over. "Kakashi," the blonde said, drawing the attention of the man who looked like an idiot at the boy standing up. "I need your little help with training Minma and Minato. You have more experience and knowledge in this." It surprised the silver-haired man, and that was when he realized something. Naruto could do it himself. He had been helping Konohamaru and the rest of the Ebisu team for a long time. "Wait a minute. You want to say that dash?" He did not finish. He did not have to. He got the answer from the blonde's gaze. Those 2. He didn't know how or why, but it turned out that both boys had awakened the Sharingan. "I have no one to talk to about it. And besides, my father treated you like a son, so you are like a brother to me, Kakashi," he said with a full and broad smile. He was sincere, full of love and enthusiasm, warm, just like years ago. "You are their uncle, Kakashi and I." The silver-haired man didn't know what to say. He'd been alone for years, him and no one else. All his relatives were dead. His students, whom he treated like family, had their own families and did not have much time. He wanted someone to depend on, someone to call his family, but he was too afraid to love. Therefore, when he heard the blonde's words, an emptiness reigned in his head, warmth spread over his body, a nice feeling. He was happy. He was so happy. He did not expect the blonde to ever call him brother. Kakashi could not stop the tears flowing to his black eyes. He cried, He cried with happiness. For the first time in years, he removed the mask covering his face, showing a sincere, happy smile, and his cheeks were adorned with salty liquid, tears of happiness. 9. Chapter 9. So we have to finish this quickly. The blonde was standing, and for a few good minutes, he was watching his old sensei talking with his children. Minma told his uncle the things that had happened recently with great enthusiasm. How they spent their days, how great their mother cooks, how they had fun with Sarada and Baruto. Saruto was sitting next to him, smiling at the man, and little Minato was sitting on his brother's lap, cuddling up. Silver-haired man was surprised at first, but when he started talking, he listened more because they did not let him come to a word too much. But when they let him sit in silence, they listened carefully. He understood and noticed their resemblance to their parents. He sat relaxed, feeling as if he was talking to a young blonde. He had to admit their company was more enjoyable than Baruto. He had nothing against him, but despite how much he looked like his father, it was hard for him to name it. Maybe he was just too anxious to let his father devote his time to him? Kakashi really didn't know how to say it. I've never seen him so happy, he thought, smiling to himself. True, his foster brother rarely showed his smile, hardly ever because of the mask, and now he sat without a mask on his face, smiling from ear to ear, tears of happiness wiped from his face long ago. When Naruto saw that the man was crying, he was slightly scared. He calmed down only when Kakashi hugged him and thanked him. The blonde couldn't stop smiling. He was happy that his sons accepted their uncle, just as both they and Baruto and Sarada accepted each other as siblings. Everything was going for the right, but one more thing remained. The surprise he had been preparing for years was what reminded him to call someone. Not wanting to disturb this interesting conversation, he quietly left the house. With a serious expression on his face, he stood in front of the house, staring at the phone screen, looking for a contact to a person where hardly anyone would have thought that he had any contact with this person. You'd better pick it up, he thought as he put the device to his ear. He didn't have to wait long for the person on the other side to speak. Hello? The blonde heard a male voice, and its corners rose slightly. You're lucky you picked up, he said, smiling slightly. Not a friendly smile, certainly not an eye-catcher. Ah, Naruto-kun. What you need? The man's tone changed to a much more pleasant and friendly tone for the ear. I heard from a credible dash, was not given to him to finish. It did not interest the blonde. Are you finished? He asked with no emotion in his voice. He didn't feel like chatting. Almost. But if you allow, he made a short break, waiting for a possible disapproval from the blonde. Why are you doing this? He asked without hearing any indication, so as not to drill. There was a silence. The blonde part wanted to tell him. In the end, it was he who had to do all the work, not that it bothered him. However, he chose to leave it to himself. Priorities changed, and so did the reason for the endeavor. I don't have to explain to you, much less reveal my plaintiffs, he answered after a moment. Only he heard a soft laugh, a sign that the man understood that he would not find out anyway, no matter how many times he asked. Don't forget, tell just one person and you'll be dead. No matter how much you want to hide it, remember that I am keeping an eye on you. He was completely serious. There was a reason why he let his cousin stay with this psychopath. He wasn't going to hold back. He wasn't joking. He had long stopped. I will take care of it myself. His tone was cold and unbearable. He stopped sticking out, acting like an idiot. I know. Good, and finally come back home. Or at least visit boys. They asked about you. He already said in a completely different tone. Sometimes they wondered if the blonde had a split personality or something like that because of how quickly his attitude changed, but they never got there. Don't worry, we'll be there soon, he said, thus ending the conversation. The blonde just laughed and put the phone in his pocket. Old man, we have to go back. You still need to pack, he shouted as he walked back into the house. At the same time, somewhere in a completely different part of the island, in an underground hideout, stood a black-haired snake man staring at the phone. The man had long black hair tied in a loose braid. His complexion was white, and under his eyes were two purple fangs. He was dressed in a pale blue kimono buttoned above the navel, reaching slightly below the waist with the rear part reaching the knees. Plus, he wore dark blue ankle-length pants. Ah, he didn't tell me again, he said with an artificial sadness as he looked at the contact's name. From the very beginning, he tried to find out what was the purpose of this undertaking, the experiment. The blonde did not like him much, and yet he entrusted him with something so interesting and dangerous. Well, he began by putting the device in his pocket after turning it off. Time to go back to work, isn't it, Karen-chan? He said, looking with his yellow eyes at the red-haired woman leaning against the wall. At what the snake-like man called her, the woman snorted and looked away. Damn snake. The man did not feel offended. He was used to the way he was treated by the red-haired girl and her blonde cousin. The woman wore a black short skirt and a white blouse with an elbow-length collar. The whole thing was decorated with a light green sash hanging freely on both sides of the shoulders. She had her red hair tied in a ponytail, and her bangs were combed in such a way that it did not overlap her red eyes. Still, I think I know why he wants me to do it, he said after a long pause, turning his gaze to the strange glass capsule. And you were offended when he wouldn't tell you, she said with a mocking smile, remembering how he had behaved at the beginning when the blonde man refused to explain to him. Over time, the man asked less often, on better occasions, in his opinion. Often the question sounded more playful, because he knew that the blonde probably wouldn't tell him anything anyway. Anyway, the red-haired woman's smile faded as she heard the man try to change the subject. She had to admit that the snake was fucking irritating her. The boys asked about us, he said, drawing the woman's attention. So we have to finish this quickly. They both looked at the strange glass capsule-like thing. The capsule was filled with a slightly blue liquid. All kinds of cables were connected to it, carrying various substances and agents inside. All this to bring back the life of a man whose life was not simple and did not last long. The body, locked inside, was floating freely. Little did they know then that the black-haired Uchiha would soon be joining their journey home.